So you should have received a memo. And I'm ready to admit all of our guests. Got some that have been in the waiting room and some who are just getting logged in. So, okay. As I'm managing a lot of that in the background, I thought we'd get started with just a little bit of housekeeping. My name's Ashley. I'm in marketing at Centurion Technologies. We've been doing this energy savings focused webinar series since this past November. And we've had lots of different organizations who have come forth as partners of Centurion Technologies. And they've brought a ton of information about the energy saving sector. This is extremely timely given the Inflation Reduction Act that went into place this past August. This information has been beneficial to a lot of folks. So we're bringing that to the forefront. As you're logging in and getting your audio situated and your visuals situated, please note that we'd like to use the chat function of Zoom for any questions. We may type in responses directly to you, or we may pause with the presenter and ask the question directly. So that way we can get everything answered in a timely manner. If we don't find the time during the presentation, we will get your answers immediately following before we conclude for the day. So I thought we'd take a hot second just to introduce the folks who are presenting today. First and foremost, I'd like to introduce you to Craig Kuchbaugh. He's, I think, in the bottom middle of your screen. He is for me anyways. And he is the owner of Centurion Technologies. Centurion Technologies is a comprehensive energy and power management solutions provider. They look at carbon footprint management, microgrid technologies, virtual power purchase agreements, tax incentives, grants, all those good things. So, Craig, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for putting this together. As Ashley mentioned, we have done a series and we are planning on continuing our series on webinars on energy saving and implementation of new technology. Again, we have had a wonderful set of speakers, and we're looking forward to continue to serve the C&I business and public interest portion of as this market has developed. I want to introduce you to Paige Taylor, who is on my right, should be on my right. She is joining Centurion Technologies, who's also going to be able to take sales and marketing in our residential systems management group. And again, today we have from Schneider Electric, the Microgrid Competency Center, the Vice President, Don Wingate, who is a wonderful speaker, exceptionally knowledgeable, and haven't ever been able to stump Don on any questions. So he's a pretty smart guy too.
Today could be the day, Craig. So.
Ashley, I'll turn it back to you. And again, everyone, welcome. Please ask questions. And why don't we go ahead and get started? And Don, let's introduce you and make this happen for our guests.
Gosh, right. Greg, you gave a really great segue into Don. I'm not sure I could have said it any better. Don, while you're going ahead and sharing your screen with your presentation, I'll kind of give a quick intro, add to Craig's intro. But I'm sure most folks on the line are familiar with Schneider Electric. Today we're going to get to see a lot in regards to their energy solutions. So I'm excited to see what Don has put together for us, but they are a true partner of Centurion Technologies. So thank you so much for making time. I know Don's in between traveling. I think you're not quite at your home office yet.
No, I'm not. Did my screen happen to share yet?
We can see the Zoom part. So I think if you click share PowerPoint or PDF or however you were sharing it.
It was working before here, so. Sorry, everybody. I'll get this done right. I'm going to try one more time here.
We have full confidence in you, Don.
How about that?
There we go.
Gorgeous.
All right. So Ashley and Craig, thank you so much for asking me to be on this series. I wanted to start by just giving you a little background on Schneider Electric for those of you who may not know us. We're a pretty large organization. As you can see on this chart, last year in 2022, we did 34 billion euros worth of business. We have over 128,000 folks. We're really divided into two areas where, as a company, we're probably the largest in the world that focuses on sustainability and efficiency. I represent North America for our microgrid business, and that represents about 32% of our global revenues. What this means is we're a big company, but I also want to mention that we cannot do everything by ourselves. And that's why a critical part of our business is to work with partners. And I want to give a shout out to Craig and Centurion Technologies as one of our key partners. They're involved to serve things on a regional basis and work with us to deliver more efficient and sustainable energy as we move forward in today's marketplace. I will say, to start off with, maybe let's look at a few trends that we're seeing in the industry. The days of a utility being the sole provider of energy is long gone. When we look at this, as I'll call it, the energy transition, there's a tremendous amount of new regulations that are occurring across the United States. Trillions of dollars of government funds that are going to drive investment in this area. You look at the grid itself, there's an aging infrastructure, an influx of renewables, new ways to look at what we'll call distributed energy systems, which are behind the meter sources of energy. We look at grid stability being a real challenge in today's marketplace, whether those be storms, different weather events, congestion on the grid with rolling blackouts. If you're in the California market, you're very familiar with the public safety power shutoffs. And all this really rolls up into a challenge for the distribution network and a challenge for the generation side of the business. We look at what happened with over the last few years with more people with remote work, and the generation needs have been challenged. The grid was built for a purpose, and the purpose has changed. And the utilities themselves, we have to look at what they're doing. They are investing to speed up their digitization efforts so that they are in a better position to collaborate with the behind the meter distributed energy resources. Because they're still a critical part of this. They have to operate a grid. The challenge that we have is that they're going to operate a grid, but they aren't going to own many of these assets. This little graphic I like to use because it really does show what's really happening, and it's no longer a one-way flow of electrons. You have smart grids that are being developed where the utility is putting things together, but they have to add distributed resources, whether that be wind, whether that be solar, combined heat and power. New forms of energy are on the grid, and new ways to store that energy for battery energy storage systems. But that's only half the picture. You have to look at the smart building side of it. When we look at buildings, many of the statistics that we see are buildings really use about 40% of the energy in the market today. So how do you make sure when you have your own power generation that you're looking at things like efficiency at the same time you're looking at generation assets? You also have to look at the advent of the electrical vehicle phenomenon. It's not just residential and individual cars, fleet operations, trucking. The whole industry is moving towards electrification. And what does that mean to the grid? What does it mean to commercial, industrial users? What does it mean for residential customers? So these things all have to interconnect. And this new way of looking thing looking at energy has to be forefront in people's mind so that you can do it in a more cost-effective way and really help find a way to think about it from, we'll call it from plant to plug. I spend a lot of my day talking about microgrids and helping customers decide what a microgrid is and how to implement it. So I thought maybe a good point now would be to really define what a microgrid is. You know, it's a word that has been used quite a bit. Some utilities say I'm going to put a generator next to a substation and call it a microgrid. We have a different view, and the Department of Energy has a different view. And it's really a group of interconnected loads. It's not one load. Think of, you might have solar, you might have some sort of combined heat and power, you might have a generator, you might have a wind turbine. How are all those things interconnected? How do they interface with the demand side? So a microgrid has to look at the demand for energy of a building, and it has to look at the various sources of supply. And that all has to have a ring around it in a very defined space so that it's a single controllable entity. And when those things occur, there's three outcomes that happen. One is that you're able to optimize your energy cost, whether that's to be predictable with your cost or reduce your cost. That's foremost in the cost justification of a microgrid. You also, the other leg of the stool is that it becomes a more resilient system. People are putting value on resiliency now. I always use an example. I was up in Detroit, Michigan, talking to an automotive manufacturer a couple of years ago, and they experienced a 2-minute outage. And, you know, one might say, okay, 2 minutes, big deal. But what that 2 minutes did is it shut down an entire production facility. They had to get rid of all their people had to be paid, but they couldn't be productive. They had to reset all their equipment, all the robotics, all the energy systems. And it cost them several $1 million to get the plant back in operation for an unexpected 2-minute outage. So that's an example of valuing resiliency. And the third leg that the microgrid provides is a more sustainable source of energy. This is a few years ago, people would greenwash the word sustainability, but with the ESG goals that have, most corporations now have very strict requirements for being sustainable. So a microgrid is a way to help you get to net zero. It's a way to use sustainable energy to help power the increased demands of energy that are occurring as we move into this decade. Let's look at maybe a typical building, right? You know, a few years ago, people would have a building and they would have the utility connection, and it would go into some panel board and you would run your office or run your facility. Now things are changing, right? People are deciding to put solar over carports in their parking lot to be self-generation of energy. They're adding battery energy storage. The electric vehicles are becoming tremendous difference on the load profile of a building. How is that going to be in place? And from a Schneider Electric perspective and our partners like Centurion, we're able to offer these complete systems, whether it be the electric charging capability, the efficiency of the building, the controls and storage to make things work, and tying everything together into this prosumer model where you're producing and consuming your own energy. You're doing it to solve all three of those things that we talked about: better cost predictability and savings, better resilience and reliability, and reducing the greenhouse gas through sustainable energy. That's really the evolution that we're seeing. And you can take that down to a residential level as well, where homes, if you're in California, for example, they have a thing called Title 24, where if you have new construction, you're going to have solar on your home. You're going to have a battery energy storage system on your home. You're really creating a little nano grid on the residential level. And when you plug in your electric vehicle, it provides another source of storage of energy for your home that can also eventually be two-way interaction with electrons to the grid. So there's new sources of revenue for homeowners, new sources of revenue for ancillary services for grid, for people who want to interface with the grid, and more challenges for the utility itself to make all this work together. The other thing I wanted to maybe take a minute to dive into the different types of microgrids. One we'll just start with is the always grid tied system that is non-islandable. And this is sometimes a first step that people take. And the microgrid itself supplements your energy production. It's grid following, and it uses battery energy storage and many times the photovoltaics just to help you reduce your load and shave peaks, and allows you to have some use cases as long as you're always tied to the grid. In many cases, people only have a really good utility that maybe have for just a couple of minutes a year or very low, you're always on. So you don't have to pay for or have the capability to island. So that's one set of use cases. It's not always the case, and we'll call that the islandable microgrid. And this happens when the grid goes down and you want to have a seamless transition. And this is sort of a grid following microgrid that allows people to automatically transfer when you lose power from the grid to keep either your entire facility or pieces of your facilities. You can decide to have critical loads or what you might transition to. We have a microgrid at one of our 6 global R&D centers is up in Andover, Massachusetts. And we have an islandable microgrid for that facility where we've decided what are the critical facilities. We wanted to have customer conference rooms be critical. We wanted to have elevators be critical. We wanted to have certain things of our data center that are critical. What we decided was, and actually our cafeteria is critical. We felt if there was a snowstorm that stranded people, we wanted to have the good health and safety for our employees. What we decided was not critical is that we would take some of the plugs on their individual cubicles and say, we're going to turn off the power to your PCs. We're going to reduce the loads of lighting in conference centers. We might shut down some of the demonstration centers. We made conscious choices to say what's critical and what's not critical to extend the time that we would be able to be islandable, so that we can use our solar, we can use our battery, we use our generators that have fuel storage capability to maximize the time that we did not need the grid. The other important factor of an islandable microgrid is the fact that you're able to go back online when the grid comes up and do that just as seamlessly as when it was disrupted. The third type of microgrid is that there are certain customers who want to be totally off grid. We're finding uses for those up in Alaska and in Upper Canada, or places where there are very remote capabilities. And this is when a microgrid operates entirely by itself. It needs baseload generation as well as renewable energy. But in the lower 48 states, we find that 99% of our microgrids are either always grid tied or islandable. So those are kind of the 3 types of systems that we're seeing are really developing across the U.S. So what are sort of the value propositions that we're seeing? We're finding that you need algorithms to figure out how to lower your energy cost. 5 or 6 years ago, a utility might have 2 tariffs. daytime rate and a nighttime rate. Now there are dozens of tariff operations. The sun is important. When is the sun shining? What does the weather patterns look like? How do you store electrons efficiently? All these things have to be put together in a consistent way to manage the cost of energy and make it more predictable. Sustainability is another thing that how do you meet your goals? How do you track when you reduce carbon? How do you find ways to get the greenest power used in your facility? It's called Scope 1 reductions, where you really make the best use of green energy to run your building and be able to publish that to your constituents and your stakeholders. And the third area of your value is that resilience, and the controls have to be able to not only keep power on, but make sure that power quality is available and find ways to measure that. So it's not just about doing something, it's about measuring it, monitoring it, and reporting on it. And all that's available with the new controls that are on the market today, and the way that you might have a single pane of glass so that you're able to see in its entirety what your system is doing. The other thing that people need to do is really design the systems properly, right? There's a lot of, I'll call it, shiny objects available. There's always a new piece of equipment or technology that has a claim that it's going to do something. I think it's really important to make sure that when you're considering becoming a prosumer, making sure that you want to have reduced cost, that you design the system properly and get expertise to really help you with this model. It was interesting. I was at a conference, and the California Energy Commission does a lot of grants for storage. And the director, the head of the California Energy Commission, made a sort of a bold statement. He said that of all the grants that they made over the last 5 years for storage, where they provided financial assistance to people, he said 50% of the companies were out of business. And to me, that was telling that, it's not just looking at this bright, shiny object, it's looking at what's going to be around for a long period of time. These systems that people are putting in, they have to last 20, 25 years. They have to have support. They have to have the legs to make sure that they work. So I feel that it's really important to make sure that you have the right system design and look at not just the function, but the company, the support, the operating expenditures. The other element that's a newer element is the concept of energy as a service. There's a lot of investors and money coming into the market today to say, I want to be a provider of energy as a service to a company. And here's the value proposition. I will not charge you anything up front. I will design the microgrid. I will build the microgrid. I will commission the microgrid. And I will maintain and own the assets for the life of the contract. And you will be an off-taker. You will buy the production of the microgrid. So people that have capital constraints, people that say, I really don't have the expertise nor the desire to manage my energy. I rather focus on my products that I'm producing or my primary business function. And I want a partner to provide my energy for me. And that energy as a service model is really gaining a lot of traction. So those are really the 5 key things that I think people really need to look at. Get predictability of cost, make sure you're doing things in a sustainable and efficient way, make sure you have good power quality and are resilient, look at things that actually are going to work, and figure out what financial model you want to do to get the most out of your investment. Let's pull the curtain back a little bit. and what makes all this work. And I look at this as layers on a cake, right? I mean, the stuff that's visible are maybe the box that holds your battery energy storage system, the inverters and PV that's sitting on a roof or in a parking lot or in a field, the chargers that are on the exterior of a building. Those are things that are the building blocks. That's above the line, the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. But you need the gear behind the curtain. We call it our energy control center, where that's the low voltage and medium voltage equipment. It's the metering, it's the switch gear, it's all the controls and breakers that have to manage the energy. So that's the electrical distribution system that's behind the fence, so to speak, and in your control room. Then on top of that, there's software layers. There's the power management system, and that's really the brains of it. And that assures the stability and safety of the energy supply. It manages all the sequence of operations when things go bump in the night. And it really is the intelligence that drives this coordination of all the distributed energy resources. Then another layer on top of that is an energy management system. And this is sort of a cloud-based system that will look at the tariffs that are available that are geographically associated with the microgrid. It looks at weather patterns. It looks at the ancillary services that are available and puts all these things together and makes recommendations to the microgrid so that it knows what to do and does the economic analysis for you. When all these things work in conjunction, there's not somebody sitting over a control center making all of this happen. This all gets done behind the scenes and operates. And yet you still have access to it, whether that be on your cell phone, whether that be to a personal computer, to let you know what's going on and lets people override if something has to happen. The other part that we don't want to forget is that there's a utility involved. And there's an interconnection agreement that needs to be done so that you can maximize any export value that comes and work with the utility if there's a demand response program. So all these things are linked together, and you have to understand that, and that's why a partnership model that we have is really, really important. So I hope that this doesn't come across as this is a very complex system, but we're finding that there's a new need to have more, I'll call it a microgrid in a box concept, where how do we minimize the engineering time? How do we minimize the supply chain issues? How do we find ways to do things that are simpler and more cost effective? Now, we've analyzed the market. We think that there's 3 tiers that will be about 90% of the market that's available. Tier 1 is these smaller systems of 50 kilowatt to 500 kilowatt load. Tier 2, which is we have our eye on that. We're releasing some new products next month for this containerized configured to order microgrid. And this is that 500 to 1 megawatt load, which makes up about 60% of the market in the United States. The larger tier 3 are bigger customers, and we feel that as a company, we're starting in this middle tier for our configured to order microgrid systems. Here are some of the use cases that we look at, whether it's remote energy monitoring, tariff management, demand charge reduction, consumption optimization, predictive export of energy. Those are all use cases that the microgrid does to control your costs and optimize your efficiency. When you get into the islanded microgrids, then you can have more ancillary services, load shedding activities, and load sharing, where you can move things from one user to the next. So it's not just one value stream. Microgrids are not used just for backup and emergency purposes. They've got to earn their stripes every day. And this is a list of things that are use cases that are kind of built into the microgrid systems that we have today. The last chart that I have here is the fact that I want to dispel a couple of myths, right? And maybe they aren't. These are just actual functionality, right? Microgrid projects used to be very unique, right? And some projects still are. We have some that we've done. We did one up at the Marine Corps Air Station where they serve 19,000 people on the base. We have to operate a flight line. We've got to keep it operational, completely disconnected from the grid for 3 weeks. These are very complicated systems. So these microgrid projects that are engineered to order, they have long lead times for equipment, a lot of engineering time. The commissioning is extensive to test it and make it all work. And they're really designed from scratch. Nothing wrong with those types of projects. We'll continue to do them, but they're not where we see the market going. We see the market going to more a microgrid in a box concept, where these are going to be configured to order. There's going to be standard architectures that are tested, validated, documented architectures that say, here are the guardrails of a microgrid. These are the 6 use cases that you're going to get. This is the range from like that tier 2, half a megawatt to 1 megawatt in size. There's going to be simple tools that are going to help developers like Centurion to be able to configure the microgrid rather than have an engineer design it. The software will take over and drive the sequence of operation, drive the code for the program learning controls, the PLCs, to make it all work together. It'll be easy to size, quote, build, and condition. And the end result of this is the lead times will be significantly less. The commissioning time will be very rapid. We expect that this microgrid in a box concept we'll call it a 30-week microgrid rather than a year microgrid. The costs will be much more cost effective and straightforward to work. So we see the market trend, part of this is how do we do cost savings? Let's configure, let's give people a place to start. Let's make it simple for folks to put in place. Let's let our partners have a way to go to market that's easier and really drive the sustainability and the resilience and the cost predictability. So those are kind of the 2 things. Schneider Electric is involved in complex projects, happy to keep doing that. But we feel the future is to go to a more configured microgrid in a box concept. So that's what I had. I don't know if I have talked too much but I'll stop there and we can take any questions that we have.
Thank you, Don.
And thank you for everyone's attendance.
Exactly. I didn't see any other questions come in. Would anybody like to open up for questions now? Because Don has given us some extra time.
I like to keep it brief. So
you hit all the highlights, that's for sure. So I did answer in the chat. There were some direct messages just to me asking. Yes, we will be providing the presentation today, as well as a link to review the video at any time. You can also find those things on Centurion Technologies' Facebook page at any time and on centuriontechnologies.com. If you click on news, you can review previous recordings, and you will be able to review this one before the end of this week, but we will notify you by email when those are posted. So if there are no other questions, that's no problem at all. Don, any final comments on today's presentation?
There was one question about an approximate cost to the middle tier things. That I wish I could give you a simple answer. We have to spend a little bit of analysis to figure out what are the loads of a building, what type of distributed energy resource is it going to, how much room for solar might there be? What is the size of the battery? What's the tariff rates for that individual utility? And that normally just takes a couple of days to figure out, to get a primary assessment put together. So we can talk to you more specifically on it. But I think my final thoughts are, I really appreciate everybody attending. I appreciate Centurion and Craig and his organization for being a partner for Schneider Electric. I'm happy to answer any questions or dialogue with anybody one-on-one and offline. And I hope everybody goes away thinking that microgrids are a really strong idea.
There's no question that microgrids will be the future of our new energy structure, and Centurion Technologies is very proud to be a part of Schneider Electric and looking forward to be a major part of that growth. Everyone, thank you so much for attending. Ashley, thank you very much. You're a rock star. Much appreciated. Everybody have a good day now.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate everybody's time. Take care.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks again, Don.